So the first thing I'd like to do is actually explain the setup that I'm using here. I guess the main things are we have the video. How am I getting the video? How am I getting the audio? Setting, things like that. Stagecraft, I guess you'd call it, instead of setting. But I'm using an external light source. This isn't the regular lights in my room. I have like a softbox pointed at me. Sometimes I use two softboxes if I'm trying to do something dramatic. Like if I have a nice background. I used to have a nice background. I don't have that anymore. We're just going bare walls for this one. But I'm using an audio interface. This is the specific audio interface that I'm using right here. It's called a Zoom P4. It's made specifically for podcasting. You can also use it for live streaming or as an audio interface like I'm using it right now. One of the cool features with this is while you're using it as an audio interface, if I were to press the record button, where's the record button? It's this little red button right here. I guess you can't see it, the wire's in the way. I would be recording the audio separately. But what I'm doing now is I'm using my Chromebook. I have the audio interface, the Zoom P4 plugged directly into my Chromebook. And I'm just running the video recorder on the Chromebook. And so instead of using the microphone that's built into the Chromebook, it's using this audio interface and then this microphone here. This microphone here is a SM58, Shure SM58. It's maybe like $100. It's one of the most popular live performance microphones ever. It was originally designed for pretty much podcasting, but like they didn't have podcasting in the 60s and 70s, so it was used for like radio announcers. Basically, that's what it was intended for. It actually didn't catch on with radio announcers. They had other things that they like to use, and I want to say eventually, Shure, before they canceled it, they went, well, you know what, this is a good mic for live performances. And they sent it out to a lot of live performers in the 70s and 60s. And it caught on with live performance. So now, for the most part, any nightclub or bar or music venue or comedy club you go to, they're going to own a few of these microphones. And most likely, you're going to use this microphone. To tell you how popular this microphone is, it was like Frank Sinatra's favorite live performance microphone. I don't know if he actually recorded with it, but he definitely did all of his live performances using this. There's this great story from one of the Shure engineers when he was a young man in I guess it was the 70s. They had invented a new microphone to replace the SM58 as their go-to live microphone, and they sent this guy out to Vegas to see if Frank Sinatra wanted to use their new microphone. And apparently Frank Sinatra said 5 words into the microphone. This is at the rehearsal in Vegas, the dress rehearsal. Frank Sinatra says a few words into the microphone, unplugs it, and throws it against the wall. And he goes, "Give me my 58." So very popular microphone. As far as like stand-up comedians, like this is, it's not like the best microphone you can buy. By stand-up comedian, by like our metrics, it's kind of expensive at $100. But in the grand scheme of things for microphones, it's one of the cheaper microphones you can get. I've seen them, as old as like 20 years old. Like some people have the same ones that they had, when I was a little kid. So they last for a long time. They have a good reputation. But for stand-up, we don't need the top of the line microphone. It's like about consistency. So like I told you guys a story about Frank Sinatra, but like if you start looking at different stand-up specials and stand-up performances, you'll notice that this microphone shows up a lot. I was watching Ali Wong. She was using it. I was watching an older Mike Epps stand-up special. He was using it. I was watching the most recent Jerry Seinfeld stand-up special. He was using it. Jerry Seinfeld, he's probably got like a net worth approaching $1 billion. So and he signed a deal with Netflix for, I don't know, like 50 million, 70 million, some amount in the high millions, like, over $20 million. It was at least 50 million. So in reality, when he signs a deal that big with Netflix, he can use any equipment he wants to use, like any equipment on the market. He has his pick of the litter. And this man who's almost a billionaire, who's doing this project that probably he's going to make millions of dollars off of, he entrusted the entire project to an SM58 microphone. If you watch, what is it? I believe the name of the special is 24 Hours to Kill, something like that. The one where he jumps out of the helicopter to start the special off. Fantastic comedy special. He's using this microphone, the same microphone that any one of us can scrape our pennies together and walk to a Guitar Center and buy for $100. That's what this billionaire is using. So if it's good enough for Jerry Seinfeld, it's good enough for us. I even saw Chris Rock. He's been doing interviews remotely from his home. He's using this microphone. Very popular microphone, even with superstar, highly wealthy comedians. They even use it. So I figured it was a good place for me to start with this for my podcast. I actually got this microphone 3 or 4 years ago when I first started doing comedy, just so I could practice at home. Didn't really have that great of a setup. Still don't have that great of a setup. I don't know if I showed you guys what I'm using. I showed you guys the P4. Yes, I did. But yeah, why start a podcast? It's been a joke, a running joke in the stand-up community that every stand-up has a podcast. I guess it's a joke in all these communities, not just stand-up, about how there are too many podcasts. Why do people do these podcasts that nobody listens to, so on and so forth? As if there's only value in something if it's popular. Think about it. Like, we do stand-up comedy, right? We go to open mics where sometimes the only people in the audience are other comedians and they're not listening. We still do it. We still find value in it. We do book shows, paid shows, sometimes that are not very well attended, or they are well attended and it's not the best audience, not the most receptive audience. We still do it though. We still do it. And there's value in repetitions. Like, think about, how can you have a successful podcast if you don't know how to podcast, if you don't know the ins and outs, you don't know how to work your equipment, you don't know which equipment you should get, you don't know where the pitfalls are going to be. These are things you learn from doing it. You, like, even with a unsuccessful podcast, I'm going to define unsuccessful by not a lot of people download it. You don't have any sponsors yet. Even with that, you're working on a lot of your mechanics. You're getting better at using your equipment. You're getting better at knowing how to upload your stuff, how to write your descriptions, how to build your logo, how to thumbnails, whatever you want to call it. You're learning all these things while you're working on this podcast. And maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't hit. Let's say it never hits. Let's say it never becomes popular. You never get sponsors from it. I believe there's still value in that. And that, one, you're learning how to make a podcast and you'll be more a better guest on other people's podcasts because now you know what goes into it. But I also think that there's value in speaking your mind and holding a microphone, even if there isn't a immediate audience, especially if you get to converse with someone else and you do the give and take and you can, like, really think about your ideas. And it's low stakes because, maybe nobody ever hears it, but it is still high stakes because you're going to publish it. You're going to post it online where it could be available, where you are open to ridicule and stuff like that. And I think that there is great value in just that. So, like, I'm late to the game. We've been in quarantine for over a year now. Everybody else, some people have started, stopped, and they've had 3-4 different podcast ventures since this thing started. But I think that this is listening to the podcast. Like, I'm not a huge podcast guy, but every once in a while I listen to what's his name? Very successful, the WTF Mark Maron podcast. Very successful podcast. I listened to a bunch of episodes of that during quarantine, and it's interesting. And, like, I'd like to get some of the people I've met on here, whether they be comedians or lawyers or medical doctors or just whoever, just people to talk to and have a record of it. You know, like this is the power of the age that we're growing up in, the democratization. I can't even pronounce the word. Availability of this equipment, these resources. Like I think about, even though it's not a podcast thing, but it's like a YouTube thing. You think about a fantastic comedic writer and producer, Issa Rae. I actually consider Issa Rae like this generation's Lucille Ball. But like you look at like how things really popped for her. It was, even though it was high production value, it was a self-produced online TV show that she made for herself. And there's no shortage of people who hone their craft on social media, on modern mass media websites like YouTube, Twitter, whatever. Hell, Desus and Mero, they started off as Twitter guys. You got to start somewhere. And I think a lot of us think about, so if you're a comedian, think about this. Every once in a while, you'll do a good show. Well, most of you guys do good shows all the time, but for me, every once in a while, I do a good show. And an audience member will walk up to you and they're like, man, I could never do what you're doing, man. Where do you guys are so brave, man. You guys got guts. I've been thinking about doing this for so long. I never really bothered the comedians before I started, but I never thought that it was a thing that I would have any success at whatsoever. It had never even crossed my mind that I could do it. I just really enjoy watching other people do it. But there was a certain point, maybe 3 years before I started, 4 years before I started, saw the great Chicago comedian Hannibal Buress. He just did like a bar in my neighborhood in New Orleans, and I just thought it was fantastic. And not that I thought I could do what he was doing, but seeing him, this professional, famous comedian, up there with like the same guys I would see every week, just, you know, who are from New Orleans, and seeing how high quality their stuff was. It wasn't as high quality as his stuff, but it wasn't like they were playing different sports. It was like they were in the same sport. And it's like, if I should have started then. When I first got the bug, I should have started then. 4 years before I started. It's like, imagine, like, I'm all right now, but I'd be much better. I'd be twice as good as I am now if I would have started 4 years earlier. So I'm thinking it's the same thing with podcast or any other endeavor. Why wait to start? We got everything we need. Like, you don't even need this microphone or this audio interface or even this laptop. You can do it just from your cell phone. I'm sure that there are people out there doing it where they're just recording straight to their cell phone and uploading it. I think that it's a thing, man. You have something to say. And it's just figuring out a way to package your ideas in a way where people want to listen. And I think that it's just like comedy. It's just like stand-up. The way to do that is through repetition, smoothing off the rough edges. And, you know, incremental improvement to the point where you hit this level of minimum competency. And I think that's where I am with stand-up. I'm at a level of minimum competency. It's like no one's afraid to put me on stage for 10 minutes. They're not thinking this guy's going to crash and burn. They're not thinking it. Yeah, John's going to give it a good shot, and he's got a chance with, you know, decent audiences. Yeah. And so I figured let's do the same thing with podcasts and let's all just go ahead and start. I'm here for you guys. John Reynolds.